Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to you. This is the Postgraduate Studies Support Program. We are going to present tonight about proposal development and defending your proposal, a guided tour of your proposal, clarifying student expectations for master's and doctoral proposal students. My name is Professor Sarah Jane Johnston. I am the Head of Research and Graduate Studies in the College of Science, Engineering and Technology. Just a bit of a background, I think, about me before we start. I'm a mathematician by training, so a lot of what I talk about, I'm going to try and related to for some of the science students as well. So it's going to be this presentation is going to be for everybody. So let's dive straight into the presentation. I'm going to share my screen and switch off my camera, I think, and we can get started. Today's presentation, as I said, is proposal development and defending your proposal, a guided tour of your proposal, clarifying student expectations for master's and doctoral proposal students. So I'm hoping to be able to do all three for you today. Particularly, I know that you've done a lot of work about proposal development and what goes into a proposal. I don't think you've done too much about defending your proposal, so we'll talk quite a bit about that. But I'm hoping to give you exactly that, a guided tour of your proposal and what the expectations are, both from us as academics, as supervisors, and from you as well. So some of these slides you would have seen before, or you would have seen the content of them before. If any of you are scientists, you'll know that the best way to start off anything is with a definition. So what exactly is a research proposal? It's described as a systematically formatted and detailed statement of intent of the researcher, which presents and justifies a plan of action and shows the investigation plan. So if we were to just simply put this, this is a proposal is a plan of action. What are you going to do? Why are you doing it? And how are you going to do it? Those, I think, are the three main things that come up with the proposal. You don't need to screenshot any of these slides. I will make them available. So you can just sit back and relax and just read through these with me as we go along. So what is a research proposal? So there are various terminologies that describe a research proposal. It's a research outline, a synopsis of the research, a plan of the research, a research proposal, as what we've been talking about, or a thesis plan. So a research proposal, will be called one of these things. And as said before, it's a plan of action, a blueprint of future activities of a research project, a preconceived framework for implementation of research activity. It deals with the ideas of a researcher about what research he or she wants to do, what objectives and methodology he or she has chosen, how much time and resources are required to complete it, how the research finding are to be reported and disseminated. And I think this final bullet is perhaps what I was talking about, that it deals with the ideas of a researcher, what research the researcher wants to do, what the objectives are, the methodology, and then how much time, what resources are required, how the research findings are going to be reported and disseminated, and I guess those are the things that are most important in your proposal, and this is what you're going to talk about in your defence of your proposal later on. So in practical terms, a research proposal is a comprehensive overview of the researcher's intentions in completing their proposed study. It details plans for all aspects of the research process. This we know. It is also the first step in obtaining your ethical clearance. So this is something that you'll need to go through the process of getting once you've done your proposal. The ethics policy of UNISA and of most other universities is pretty much the same, or it's got the same story behind it of what's involved. So ethical clearance is required for all research conducted at UNISA. So it doesn't matter what research you do. If it involves human participants, animals, conceptual work, use of secondary data, laboratory experiments, or even just a literature review study, you need to have ethical clearance for that. So the mathematicians in the room will say, well, mathematics doesn't involve any of these things. Maybe it involves some of the literature review studies, but other than that, we don't need ethical clearance. Yes, you do. Everybody needs ethical clearance. It doesn't matter what research you're doing. You definitely are going to need ethical clearance. Those of you doing literature studies, for example, or English studies, I don't need ethical clearance. Yes, you do. So everybody needs to have ethical clearance. Your supervisors should have ethical clearance. If they don't, please direct them to the ethics policy. Everybody must have ethical clearance. Students, that's you, must apply for research ethical approval within the first 6 months of registering for a master's or doctoral degree, after examining and passing the postgraduate proposal. So yeah, that speaks for itself. Research ethical approval must be applied for before fieldwork or any data collection commences. So you need to get your ethical clearance for all research, doesn't matter what research it is, and you need to get ethical approval before you do any research. So before the research begins, before your fieldwork begins, before any data is collected, before you start doing any of the research, you must have ethical clearance. So that's just a little bit about the ethics policy. I'm not going to talk about applying for ethical clearance. That's something for another day, and that'll keep us busy for at least an hour. So yeah. So this is just a comparative overview. If we go back to the proposal, the research process versus the actual proposal itself. So I'm I've put here 7 steps that you should follow in putting together your proposal. So we've got this process going on here. So first of all, decide on a topic, and I think you've done. You've had a lecture on deciding on a topic and how to decide on a topic, what kind of topic to decide on, developing the overview of a topic. That's your step 2. You would have talked about that as well. Step 3, determination of information requirements and collecting data. Step 4, organizing the information or the data. Step 5, analyzing and evaluating the information. Step 6, synthesize the information. And step 7 is communicate or present the research. So what do you get out of all of these steps? Well, first of all, you've got your introduction. That will be the background of the topic, the rationale for the study. So why are you doing this? Why is it interesting? Why is it important? Definitional issues. Remember, we start off with a definition. It's the best place to start for anything, for any science at all, whether it's communication science or mathematics. It doesn't matter. Start with your definition. Then you'll have your literature review. You'll talk about your data search strategy, your inclusion/exclusion criteria, and appraising the literature. You'll then have your ethical considerations, your methods, your methodological choices, pardon me, your data collection, your analysis. All of that will go in there as well. Then results and findings. So you probably won't have too many results or findings when it comes to your proposal, because your proposal is your plan. You haven't actually done the research yet, but you'll talk about what you probably expect to happen. So in mathematics, for example, if you're looking at orthogonal polynomials, for example, you talk about how you would expect the Jacobi polynomials to be orthogonal with respect to some weight function. So you can talk about what you expect to find. Then your discussion and your recommendations, and then how you're going to publish this, how you're going to let other people know what you've done. So this is quite a nice summary of a process overview. We've got it as questions to be asked, steps to be taken, and then the key elements. So first of all, what is the problem? Why should it be studied? The steps to be taken is the selection and statement of the problem. And the key elements here are problem identification, problem prioritization, justification. Then what information is already available? This is your literature review. Your key elements are your resources and your reviewing. Why do or conduct the research? What is the likely outcome, achievement of the research? The steps to be taken here, formulation of your aim and objectives. So your key elements will be your aim, your goals, your general and your specific objectives. You've talked about objectives and aims and goals. Hypothesis, you've done all of this. This is now putting everything together. Then how to carry out the research, how to collect data and information, where from to collect the data and information, So this is your research methodology. So you will have variables here. This is your key elements will be your variables, your types of research, data collection techniques, sampling, the data analysis plan, the data processing plan, and your data interpretation process and plan. Then just to continue, who will collect and when? So what is your work plan, your elements of the step, your personnel, manpower? So are you going to be doing it yourself, or is somebody else going to be doing it? What's your timetable? How will this be monitored? How will the research findings be used? What is the research administration plan? So the elements of the step, administration, monitoring, identification of potential users. What and how much resources will be needed? Who will provide the resources? So what is your budget and who is funding you? So here are the elements of the step. You'll have the 3 M's, man, materials, and money. So these are your 3 important things. Fundraising or fund collection. That's what will come from putting together your budgets and your funding organizations. Then who will submit, how to submit, where to submit. We're looking at the proposal preparation, proposal presentation, the appropriate authority, the elements of the step of the researcher, the proposal, and the presentation techniques. So this is a lot, and you've seen all of this before. How are you doing? Right, so let's move on. I think this is the biggest question, is how to write a research proposal. And this is, I guess, the question that you're here for us to answer. So again, you know what a research proposal is. It's a plan of action. It's intended to convince others that you have a worthwhile research project and that you have the competence and the work plan to complete it. Generally, the research proposal will contain all the key elements involved in the research process and include sufficient information for the readers to evaluate the proposed study. Regardless of your research area and the methodology you choose, research proposals must address the following questions. So these are the important questions. What do you plan to accomplish? Why do you want to do it? And how are you going to do that? So what do you plan to accomplish? What you want to find out whether Jacobi polynomials are orthogonal or not, why you want to do it, why is it important, what will it do to help you going forward. Well, Jacobi polynomials come up in all sorts of engineering applications, so knowing that they'll be orthogonal or not will be very useful. It'll also help us to determine where the zeros are. All of those sorts of things will go into it. And how are you going to do it? Aha, that's the trick. So how are you going to do it? You're going to use the theory that you know about orthogonal polynomials to work it out. So that's just an example from mathematics for you. So the proposal should have sufficient information and be empirically supported to convince your readers that you have an important research area, that you have a good grasp of the relevant literature and the major issues, and that your methodology is sound. Right, so again, you've talked about a lot of the stuff before. We'll go through it very quickly. Your title, you've been through this. You know that it needs to be concise and descriptive. It needs to be short and to the point. Your abstract needs to be approximately 300 words for a PhD, 150 words for a master's. That's just a ballpark figure. It's give or take. I wouldn't give or take more than 10% of 300 words or 150 words, depending on whether you're doing a master's or a PhD. So if you're doing a PhD, no more than 330 words and no fewer than 270 words, give or take. Within that range, that will work. It should include the research question, the rationale for the study, the hypothesis, the method, and remember, you won't have any findings or any conclusions at this stage. If you do, or if you have an idea of what you should be getting as your findings, then include that by all means. But it's not necessary at this stage because you haven't done the research yet. This is just a proposal. All right, so the introduction, you've talked about the introduction before and what should go into it. The main purpose of an introduction is to provide the necessary background or context for your research problem. It's going to frame your research problem. Secondly, you need to provide a brief but appropriate historical backdrop. So you need to, this is where your literature review will come in, or some of your literature review will come in, what has been done before. Thirdly, provide the contemporary context in which your proposed research questions occupies the central stage. And finally, identify the key players and refer to the most important and representative publications. So you are going to you're going to look at the history, what's been done before. And by history, I mean not necessarily 100 years ago, what's been done in the last 10 years or even shorter than that. So your introduction will cover some of the following elements, or generally covers the following elements. So state your research problem, which is often referred to as the purpose of the study. So what is it that you're studying? Provide context and set the stage for your research question in such a way that it shows its necessity and importance. Present the rationale of your proposed study and clearly indicate why it's worth doing. Why is it important? That's one of the biggest questions that you can have for your PhD or your master's is, why is this important? And for me, it's always the question that I ask when it comes to a proposal defense. Why is this important? Why should we study this? Briefly describe the major issues and sub-problems to be addressed by your research. Identify the key independent and dependent variables of your experiment. Alternatively, specify the phenomenon that you want to study. State your hypothesis or your theory. So you may not necessarily have a hypothesis, but it just really depends on what your study is all about. So don't read into that too much, but just for those of you who will have statistics in your your thesis or your dissertation, don't confuse the hypothesis with your statistical null hypothesis. We're not talking about the same thing there. We're talking about the theory. And then set the boundaries of your proposed research in order to provide a clear focus and provide definitions of key concepts. The literature review and description of the study problem. Remember, the literature review serves several important functions. It ensures that you're not reinventing the wheel. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't want to have a thesis that is work that's already been done. So it's important that you go and you research what has been done in the past, who has done what, where. It demonstrates your knowledge of the research problem, so it convinces the reader that you do know what you're talking about, and that your research problem is a good one. It also demonstrates your understanding of the theoretical and research issues related to your research question. It shows your ability to critically evaluate relevant literature information, indicates your ability to integrate and synthesize the existing literature. So, yeah, all of this is exactly that, making sure that you are not reinventing the wheel. It's looking back and seeing what has or has not been done. It also provides new theoretical insights or develops a new model as the conceptual framework of your research, and it convinces your reader that your proposed research will make a significant and substantial contribution to the literature. So again, it's that reinventing the wheel. Nobody wants to hear what's been done already. They want to see what you've done and why is it new. So you need to talk about the history behind it before you can get into your problem. So yesterday, Professor Muguchini said that your literature review and the description of your research problem, should be about 3/4 to 1 page, give or take. Again, I wouldn't give too much or take too much. Anything between 3/4 of a page and a page is probably enough. This is for the proposal, mind you. When you get to the thesis, you're going to need significantly more than that. But for your proposal, up to a page is sufficient. Excuse me. So the methods and theoretical framework. This section will articulate how you plan to tackle your research problem. It will provide your work plan and describe the activities necessary for the completion of your project. So the guiding principle for writing the method section is that it should contain sufficient information for the reader to determine whether the methodology is sound. It's important to provide your methodological and theoretical defense for the choices made. Why qualitative versus quantitative? So these are the things that you need to think about when it comes to this section. I'm not going to go through all of this. You've been through all of this before. All of these questions, the design, subjects or participants, instruments, procedure. Then remember I've said that at the results stage, there are no results at your proposal stage. Your planning should focus on the kind of data to be collected and what statistical procedures will be used in order to answer your research question or test your hypothesis. Then there should be a discussion question. Again, it's important to convince your reader of the potential impact of your proposed research, merits of the proposal, and anticipated unique contribution to be specified. Okay, so this made me chuckle. What do we want? A PhD? When do we want it? Now? Why do we want it? For science, of course. Right, some common mistakes in proposal writing. So these are just 5 of the common mistakes. So failure to appropriately contextualize the research question, failure to accurately present the theoretical and empirical contributions by other researchers. That's your literature review they're talking about there. Failure to stay focused on the research question. I found that a lot of students get very excited and they want to do a lot of different things. No, rein it in. You need to be focused on just what your research question is. Don't start going and doing other broader things. Not yet. Just focus on your one thing to start with. We'll get to the other stuff. So don't get too excited about your research and start branching out. Failure to develop a coherent and persuasive argument for the proposed research, and then recurrent technical oversights. So these are some of the common mistakes. These are, then there's some guidelines. Sorry, I'm going through this quickly because I want to get to the interesting stuff. Guidelines on writing a proposal, a research proposal. Proposal writing is important to the pursuit of your doctoral degree. It is, in effect, an intellectual, scholastic contract between you and your committee. It specifies what you do, how you do it, and how you will interpret the results. A clean, well thought out proposal forms the backbone of the thesis itself. The structures are identical. Okay, this is one of the things that I wanted to really show you that's really important. So this is an example of a rubric for reading and marking a proposal for a critical reviewer. So this is the rubric. So if you have a look here, there are various things that they're going to evaluate you on. So they start off with your title. This is exactly what we've been talking about. Then the introduction and the background and problem statement, etc. And so it goes on. I'll go through all of the different sections with you. But what they've done is they've given a total score that each of these things will be graded out of. And then the rubric for title goes as follows. You get 1 point if it doesn't fit within the research area of the department. The title is unwieldy and unclear. It gives little information about the proposal. If this is where your title lies, you'll be graded 1 point. 2 points, 2 points if your title contains too many or some concepts that are value laden. So again, this is what I mean by reining it in. If you don't want to do too many things at once, you want to do something very specific. So if you've got too many concepts that are value laden, you get 2 marks. 3 marks if the title generally describes the proposal, the central research idea in the title is not immediately clear. 4 points if your title is appropriately stated and describes the proposal. What are you going to get for 5 points so that you get 5 out of 5 when it comes to your title? The title gains the researcher's interest and it's likely to make a significant contribution to the theory or practice. The title is well articulated. Food for thought, right? Your introduction or background and your problem statement, if it's not included, or it is vague or irrelevant, you'll get either 0 or 1, depending on how generous the critical reviewer is. You'll get between 2 and 3 points if there's no contextualizing of the topic and title, issues relevant to the study are not introduced, the problem is poorly articulated and not aligned with the topic and the title, it does not put the problem in a clear context. What are you going to get for 10 out of 10? This is maybe the best question. It provides national and international context for the study. Issues central to the study are properly introduced. The problem is clearly articulated and aligned with the topic and title. It provides a clear roadmap to the study and presents a very interesting and compelling problem. I think this gives you a guide as to what you want to put into your introduction or background and your problem statement. Especially provides national and international context for the study. That to me tells me something important. Then what about your rationale and your significance? If you want 5 out of 5, you need to have identified a knowledge gap and translate it into a research gap. So where is there a gap in the knowledge, in the literature, and how can you fill that gap in the research? Gaps in the research base or inadequacies of prior research is pointed out. So again, where are the holes? Where are the gaps in the research? Research evidence and anecdotal evidence and substantive research evidence are presented to justify the study. Original contribution to the knowledge and practice is clearly stated. There we go. Purpose statement for 5 out of 5. Your purpose statement needs to be aligned with the topic, the title, and the problem statement or research question. Clear and unambiguous. Adequately frames the study, aligned with the proposed research approach. Your literature review for 15 marks out of 15. The literature highlights the knowledge gap and translates it into the research gap. That's the same as the rationale and the significance. It needs to be there in your literature study as well, or your literature review. The literature relevant to the topic, aligned with the problem statement, research questions. Majority of literature sources are based on empirical and recently published research. Literature is critically evaluated, analyzed, and coherently synthesized. Debates around the topic are identified and evaluated, discuss the criteria for choosing the literature, provide a roadmap for the section, synthesize and gain new perspectives on the literature. There we go, folks. It's all there. Read back, though, to see if you get 0 to 3 points. See at the bottom there, you start citing outdated sources older than 5 years. This is not necessarily. It depends on your. It depends on your topic, or not your topic. It depends on your what's it called, on what you're studying. So if it's mathematics, generally you're going to have a lot of sources that are older than 5 years. So if you're looking at orthogonal polynomials, for example, orthogonal polynomials has only really been that interesting in the last 50 odd years. So if you've got anything in the last 50 years, that's okay. You'll have some literature that will be maybe not 50 years old, but it's certainly it'll be older than 5 years. In fact, the main book that you use for orthogonal polynomials is a book by Andrews, Askey and Roy, and that is, I think, it must be 15, 20 years old by now. So certainly you'll be citing that book, definitely. But generally, older than 5 years is probably right. You don't want to go too much older than 5 years. So do look at, when you're looking at these, don't just look at what's going to give you full marks, but have a look at the things, what will give you less marks, and make sure that you tick the boxes there as well, to make sure that you've done everything that you can for that section. It doesn't mean that the sections need to be long. It just means that they've got to be coherent. Your theoretical conceptual framework for full marks is derived from literature review. Key concepts and debates in the literature are identified, described, and linkages are shown. Research methods and design. So here it is. This is one of the most important parts for this rubric. It's 15 marks. It's 20 marks. The theoretical framework was 15 marks. Again, you've been through all of this before, but this just shows you exactly what you need to have for full marks. Shows what you need for 0 marks as well, but that's not what we're aiming for. The research question, hypothesis, research aims, goals and objectives, ethical considerations, proposal writing and technical aspects. These are all the things that that people are looking for in this specific. Let me just go back to the beginning. The specific rubric for marking a proposal. So I'm not entirely sure where this rubric comes from. I found it's on the UNISA website somewhere, but it's interesting, certainly. Then what's quite nice about this form as well is that there's not just a mark allocation, but there's space for the critical reviewer to actually write a little bit about the overall assessment, the strengths, the limitations, and the aspects that need attention. So this is quite a nice rubric, certainly for a critical reader. It tells them exactly what they need to do. Right, so if we just summarize all of this, the components and elements of a research proposal. The title, obviously, that's the good place to start. The introduction, the statement of the problem, the rationale, justification, significance of the research, expected unique contribution to the study area, scope and limitations of the study, review of the literature, objectives of the research, of operational definitions of terms used, hypothesis, methodology used, the time schedule and work plan, your budget and estimated cost, bibliography and references, conclusions, and appendix. I wish I had a whole day to talk to you. I would then talk to you also about your bibliography and your references and your budget. So just a few notes about both of those. Your bibliography or the references. We've been putting together a book for a conference, and we've recently realized that we've asked the candidates writing chapters for this book to put their bibliography in Harvard style. And we've got all sorts of styles that have come through. We've had bibliographies in APA style, in all sorts of different styles. One thing that I've noticed, though, is that people are consistent. If they've done one bibliography style, they've stuck with it the whole way through. And this is something that's very important. When you're doing your bibliography, make sure that everything is the same. If you referencing something as R. Andrews and R. Roy, then the next item in your big bibliography should not be Sarah Johnston and Zolile Mguda, for example. It needs to be S. Johnston and Z. Mguda. So you need to make sure that you are referencing consistently all the way through. So that's just my 2 cents when it comes to the bibliography. When it comes to your budget and you're looking at what things are going to cost you, if you're going to if you're doing site visits, if you're doing a dig, or if you're going to be on site and you need to stay somewhere, you put all of those budget items in. One budget item that I find students don't include is the budget for sorry, it's disappeared. What's it called? For critical reading, for what is it called? Sorry, it's just gone from my head. It was there a second ago. But basically it's where you send it to somebody to critically read it, and editing, that's what it is. For language editing or for anything like that, at the end, when you finished your thesis or your dissertation. Language editing, it's expensive, and it's something that you need to budget for. So please do put that in. In the old days, we used to have to print out our thesis or our dissertation, print 3 copies. 2 needed to be bound, 1 needed to be unbound, and we had to submit all of that. And that binding was expensive. If you went for the nice binding, if you went for the cheap stuff, then it wasn't too bad, but it was still a bit of a pricey exercise to print everything 3 times over and then to bind it. But luckily, you don't have that problem nowadays. Everything's electronic, so no pages are going to disappear or anything like that, which is good. Okay, just a couple of just something lighter, essential postgraduate skills, persistence, reflexivity, single-minded focus with an awareness of relatedness, critical reasoning, broad subject knowledge. Don't worry if you don't have the broad subject knowledge, you will by the time you're finished. An unrelenting pursuit of knowledge, sound understanding of research methodologies, being able to anticipate disagreement, resourceful and self-critical. So there you have it, everybody. Just to note, you would have, I think you've had a lecture on the catalytic niche areas. They're just something to keep in mind for those of you who haven't heard of the catalytic niche areas. These are 10 niche areas that the Vice Chancellor has identified as important at UNISA. So it's always good to have your research fitting into one of these catalytic niche areas. These are not just important at UNISA, but you find that they're important in the country as well. Being in the science college, it's a little easier for us, I think. Our astronomers have got the space study and square kilometer array, although there are lots of different types of scientists that work in the square kilometer array. So it's not just our astronomers. Same goes for marine studies, energy, automotive, and so on. So it's a lot easier for the scientists, but it takes a little bit of just a bit of inventiveness, perhaps, when it comes, and a bit of imagination for the other colleges. There are also the Sustainable Development Goals. These are UNESCO's Sustainable Development Goals. They are also some of the important goals that are for the planet to consider. So do think about these as well when you are putting together your research question or your methodology. Right, so this is perhaps the interesting section, is the defense. So what is the defense? What is the definition? Well, we've got, before we get into the definition, lots of different ways of talking about the defense. So it's known also as the viva voce or the viva voce, which is with the living voice. It's Latin. It's an oral examination or an oral defense, and it's also called a defense. You can spell it any way you like. It's not a defense where you need to grab your boxing gloves and fight for your right, but you do need to convince your audience that you are that you're right, that your proposal is a good idea. Right. So the definition in the context of a doctoral degree program, viva voce is an oral examination during which a PhD candidate defends her or his written thesis before a panel of academic experts. The viva gives the student an opportunity to demonstrate their understanding of the subject and answer questions to support aspects of the thesis that the examiners may not be satisfied with. So this is the definition of the oral examination for a PhD thesis right at the end of a PhD, but it's not, you can substitute, instead of thesis, you can write proposal. So a PhD candidate or a master's candidate will defend their written proposal before a panel of academic experts. Right, so there you have it. There's your definition. So in history, the whole story of defenses is not new. So if you go back to the ancient Greeks and Romans, you'll find that adults learned through private study, and then they would test their ideas in public discussion and debate. Certainly the culture of the times then shaped learning to mean that students would be able to quote extensively and at will from all the major classical works and be able to debate the meanings of these passages and link the argument to the issue at hand. Adult education at these times used letters to exchange ideas among scholars and books to share ideas among a readership. If we go to ancient China as well, is much the same system with the examination, with an addition of an examination. And studying for this examination meant private study of the texts, often with the assistance of a written guide. Does it sound familiar, especially for those of you who did your undergrad at UNISA? I'm sure it did. Other countries had a similar practice, not just in ancient times, but more recently as well. This defense of your work has been in the history of academia for a very, very long time. So what are the rules in the procedures for master's and doctoral degrees? This comes from the version that was approved at Senate on the 17th of March 2022. There is a more recent version, but it says pretty much the same thing. Starting from the 2021 cohort, doctoral candidates shall deliver an oral defense, a viva voce of their theses as a compulsory part of the examination process. The oral defense may take place in person or through video conferencing or any other appropriate technology. The same examiners are appointed to assess the thesis and adjudicate its oral defense. Master's candidates may be called upon to deliver an oral defense of their dissertation. They don't have to, but they might be asked to. If formal doctoral examinations are to be conducted or where a formal study program is prescribed, the supervisor with their assistant colleagues will must see to the compilation of a reading list for the candidate. The supervisor must assist the candidate to prepare for the oral defense. See also paragraph 2.4 above. So these are the rules when it comes to what UNISA wants as far as oral defense is concerned. However, many departments, not all of the departments, you'll be interested to know, ask for the defense of the proposal. Most departments do. I know a couple of departments who don't, but generally it might even be at an informal level where there are just a couple of examiners listening to you talking about your proposal. That is that could be seen as a proposal defense as well. So some departments have it formally, some departments have it informally, and there are one or two departments that don't have it at all. So it can be quite daunting, I must say. Certainly when I looked, I asked Dr. Google for advice for the student, and Trinity College in Dublin says the following. The Viva Voce exam may seem like a daunting prospect, especially to students who are already under stress as a result of finishing up their theses, but it need not be. The principal work of the PhD process is already completed through the submitting of the thesis. If the work is strong, and especially if the student is properly prepared for it, the Viva can be both enriching and empowering. The student should remember that they are the expert in the subject area. They've worked hard to get to this point, and they are discussing the fruits of their labors, of which they should be proud, with people who are interested in it and interested in what they have to say. So similarly, you haven't spent as much time on a proposal as you would for a thesis. You might feel like it, but it's not. But certainly you can be proud of the work that you've done for your proposal, doing the literature review, putting the methodology together, and certainly if you've done all of that hard work, then you don't need to be worried about it at all. You'll certainly be successful if you've done all of that work and you know what you're talking about. So you can see it one of two ways: either this is it or this is it. So certainly I hope you see it in the best way possible. Some general advice: students should present their work often during doctoral research seminars, departmental seminars, student indabas, and get used to receiving critical feedback. So this is when, not necessarily for your proposal, but for when you are actually doing your thesis and doing your PhD, you should certainly present your work as often as you can. You may find yourself going to some conferences. Definitely present your work there. I always say to my students that when you go to a conference and you're presenting you're a student, you should always start off your presentation by saying, "I am a student," so that the audience immediately calms themselves and understands that they should be a little bit more perhaps helpful to you when it comes to your work. So definitely present as much as possible. Some departments include an oral defense in doctoral proposals. In the examination process, you'll be asked to do this oral defense. This is what we're talking about. Students should present their work at conferences. Sorry, that's just what I just said. And students should be encouraged to publish their work. So certainly, as you go along, your supervisor, I'm sure, will say it's time to publish this, or this is good enough to be published, or something like that. So yes. So thank you very much. That is the end of the presentation. Don't forget the email address is PGSP for Postgraduates Support Program at unisa.ac.za if you've got any questions. I'm going to turn off my sharing and turn my camera back on, and we can go through some of the Q&A questions. You would have noticed the Q&A button on your screen that you can ask some questions. So we've got a few questions. The first one, is the viva voce applicable at proposal stage or final dissertation or thesis stage? It's always applicable. It's always a good present as much as possible. And get used to presenting. So yes, it's always applicable. Is the ethical clearance applied for subsequent to the oral defense of the proposal? Yes. So it's only once you've finished your proposal that you then start doing, well, you can do it at the same time, but you'll only start your ethical clearance application later than you will your proposal. So generally, a student will finish their proposal first, and then will do the ethical clearance application. Generally, you don't have to defend an ethical clearance application. I don't think, not that I've heard of. You'll defend your proposal, but your ethical clearance application that doesn't need a defense. But then your viva voce you will have right at the very end of your thesis as well. I hope that makes sense to you. Then thank you so much for a useful session. You're most welcome anytime. Is there a difference between an oral defense and a viva voce? Nope, same thing. Is there a difference between oral defense and viva voce? No. It's exactly the same thing. So you should be okay there. What is the... Okay, hold on. Oh gosh, there are a lot more questions here. Let's see. What is the purpose of the research outline? How is it similar to the research proposal? So the research proposal will include the research outline. So yeah, I think you've done some, you've had some presentations in the past on research outlines. It's just the research proposal will just include that research outline. Good day, excellent presentation. Thank you very much. Please share the presentation. I will do with pleasure. What's an acceptable score for a proposal to be accepted? Oof, now you're asking. So it really depends. obviously as high as possible. I don't know if that's a good enough answer. I lectured in America for a year, and their pass mark, I lectured first year, their pass mark for first year was 75%. So if you got less than 75%, but more than 50%, you got something called an NC, which was a no credit. So basically, you had failed the course, but they didn't put it onto your academic transcript. So you could do it again, and it wouldn't come on your academic transcript. So if the Americans think that 75% is a pass, well, that should be the minimum that you're aiming for. So go for it. Is the higher the better. Do you have any suggestions of search engines that we can use for a literature review of information? So I generally start with Google Scholar. I quite like Google Scholar, although it gives you a lot of information. Google is just one of these amazing things. So it will give you a lot of information. Different fields of study have got different search engines that work for them. So in mathematics, we've got something called MathSciNet. So that's a search engine of all of the mathematics publications. So you can search that. I would suggest that you go to the library website and search for the LibGuide for your research field. So if you're in mathematics, look for the LibGuide for that. If you're doing English studies, the LibGuide for that, and have a look and see what they've got in there. There's always lots of information, lots of good places to search. So it really just depends where you are. But I would start off with Google Scholar and see how you go from there. Right then. Good evening, Prof. How long should be a proposal? Good question. How long is a piece of string? It really depends. I mean, you want all the information to be there, but you don't want the information to be all over the show. You don't want it to be too broad. You want it to be concise, to the point. So it really depends. I think my proposal was quite short, but then my thesis was quite short as well. But mathematics is a different beast, so don't take that as a good guide. But I saw a proposal recently. One of our students in Ethiopia had a really awesome proposal that he showed me, and I think that was about 70 pages or so. So it really depends, and he had everything in there. He had an amazing literature review. He'd gone all out, and I think he'd actually done the entire literature review that will probably be in his thesis. So a good chunk of that introduction will be in his introductory chapter for his thesis. So he's way ahead. So how long should it be? I don't know. It really depends. See how you go. I would say probably less than 100 pages. If you're going more than that, you probably delving into thesis territory. So don't go too far in there. How long does an application for ethical clearance take? That's also a very good question. Again, it depends. It depends on the ethical clearance committee. Some of them are very quick. Some of them take a little bit longer to sign off. I really don't know. It's a while, certainly, but I can't tell you exactly how long it will take, I'm afraid. So yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, you'll have to check with your, probably with the ethics committee. They'll be able to give you a guide of how long it should take. Okay. All right. Let's see. Any other questions, or are we done for the evening? Let's just see. Oh gosh. Okay. Please explain the interest of the section 20. Oh gosh. Okay. I am not an expert on ethical clearance. So your question of why can't UNISA and the Department of Agriculture make a single document instead of having two documents, which delay students' progress, etc., etc. But yeah, that's also a very good question. I don't know. It would be great if they could make these things a lot simpler, but I'm afraid it's yeah, ethical clearance is not something easy, so they do make these things very long, I'm afraid. All I can say is hang in there. I know that it's very demotivating, and it takes a lot of time, and it's not a good thing, but please just hang in there. Do as much reading as you can while you wait. Put together your literature review, put together everything that you need, so that as soon as you get that ethical clearance, you can just get going. So yeah, just hang in there is all I can say. You'll be all right. Okay. Then thanks, Prof. Indeed, it's a very impactful session. Learned a lot. I'm busy with my proposal for my master's degree. Well, good luck. I hope it goes well. And then is the template for the proposal right or agreed by student and supervisor? What happens if the supervisor leave out certain aspects that might not be necessary? So yeah, I think it's important that you have a conversation with your supervisor, and that you go through, you chat to your supervisor about each of the sections, and see if the supervisor says leave something out, just make sure that, well, leave it out. I mean, if the supervisor says so, but I mean, things like literature review, don't leave that out, please. You'll find yourself in trouble if you leave that out. But that's just a marking rubric that I showed you. There are lots of ones, and they'll have a different one. Every department will have a different rubric. This is just one example of a rubric. So don't panic if there may be other rubrics that don't that have left out some of the sections, that is just sections that you don't necessarily need. So yeah, so just have a good conversation with your supervisor and see what you do need to have in there and what you don't need. I think that will do. Okay, I think that's all of the questions. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us today. All the very, very best for your master's and your doctoral degrees. I hope they go well. Good luck for your proposal and for your proposal defense. And I hope you have an excellent evening going forward. Take care. Thank you and bye-bye.